Picture a day when you enter the supermarket, and the once orderly shelves are starkly empty. The familiar sight of pristine white bags of rice is gone. The comforting rustle of instant noodle packets is absent. Rice, the staple that has sustained billions for centuries, is gradually vanishing. Prices are soaring, supplies are dwindling, and the rice paddies of Vietnam and India are withering under the relentless sun, leaving behind an eerie emptiness. Even instant noodles, the go-to for quick meals, have become a luxury. Factories in South Korea and Japan are forced to halt production. Supply chains are broken, and consumers are rushing to stockpile, turning once neat shelves into desolate landscapes within hours of opening. But this is just the tip of the iceberg. 18 other dry food items are quietly disappearing without warning. Things you never thought would run out are silently vanishing from everyday life. Are you absolutely certain you're prepared for the looming scarcity storm? Watch now to discover which foods are disappearing and how to seize the last opportunity to stockpile. 1. The vanishing grain: why rice might become a luxury. Have you ever considered that one day, when you step into a supermarket, you might no longer see those pristine white bags of rice piled high on the shelves that is gradually becoming a reality? In recent years, rice, the primary food source for over half the world's population, is facing a severe shortage. The cause is not only climate change, but also the disruption of the global supply chain. In Vietnam and India, the world's two largest rice exporters, the once fertile rice fields now face prolonged droughts and record low water levels in the Mekong River. Farmers cannot plant seedlings or harvest as before, and rice production has plummeted by 20% in just 1 year. This surge has spread to the U.S. market, where rice was not typically a scarce commodity. However, with the decline in production from Asia, rice prices in the U.S. are skyrocketing. Major supermarkets like Walmart and Costco are reporting stockouts of jasmine and basmati rice, the most popular varieties. Consumers are beginning to stockpile 5 and 10 bags of rice, fearing that they will no longer find them in the near future. Experts predict that if the situation does not improve, by the end of 2025, rice could become a luxury item that not everyone can afford. 2. The flour famine: why wheat flour is running out. The comforting aroma of flour each time you bake is a cherished reminder of your mother's warm kitchen. But perhaps that sensation will gradually become a memory as wheat flour disappears from shelves across the United States. Prolonged droughts in major wheat-growing states like Kansas and Nebraska have reduced production by up to 25% in just 1 year. The once vast wheat fields now show only cracked, dry earth, and the golden wheat stalks have withered under the scorching sun. With such a significant drop in production, milling plants are beginning to announce shutdowns due to a lack of raw materials. Wheat flour prices on the market are climbing rapidly, increasing by over 15% since the beginning of the year. In major supermarkets, consumers are rushing to buy every bag of flour, filling their carts as if it were precious white gold. Moreover, many bakeries and restaurants are also facing difficulties in finding enough supply to meet daily demand. Economic experts warn that if this situation persists, by the end of 2025, wheat flour could become as rare as gold, and empty shelves will no longer be an unfamiliar sight. 3. Pasta panic: the decline of the Italian staple. If you once thought that pasta, the emblem of Italian cuisine, would always be present on your table, you were mistaken. The image of shelves overflowing with packages of spaghetti, penne, and fusilli may soon be just a nostalgic memory. It all began with the historic floods in Emilia-Romagna, Italy, a region famous for its durum wheat production. The once lush, endless wheat fields are now just a sea of murky water. Farmers have suffered complete losses. Production has fallen by 30%, severely impacting the global supply of pasta. In the United States, major supermarkets like Safeway and Trader Joe's have begun to limit the quantity each customer can purchase. Consumers are lining up, hoping to buy the last few packages of pasta before they disappear from the shelves. Pasta prices are rising continuously, in some places even doubling in just months. Experts predict that if the shortage is not resolved, by the end of 2025, pasta could become a luxury item, and spaghetti dinners will only be fond memories on family tables. The grain crisis. Why oats are disappearing from breakfast tables. Have you ever started your morning with a warm, fragrant bowl of oatmeal? That comforting feeling may no longer be possible as oats, a healthy breakfast grain, are disappearing from store shelves. Canada, the world's largest oat exporter, has experienced a severe crop failure due to climate change. The vast oat fields in Manitoba and Saskatchewan are dry and cracked under the intense sun. The drop in production has caused oat prices to skyrocket in the U.S. market, especially for popular brands like Quaker Oats. Cereal processing plants have been forced to reduce production, leading to continuous stockouts. Consumers have begun to stockpile oats in large quantities, vacuum sealing them for long-term preservation. Forecasts indicate that by the end of 2025, oat prices could increase by an additional 20%. And if the shortage persists, that familiar healthy breakfast could become a luxury for many families. The corn conundrum. Why cornmeal is becoming scarce. You are likely very familiar with the sight of golden bags of cornmeal on supermarket shelves, a familiar ingredient for making cornbread, polenta, or crispy batter for family meals. But if one day you walk into the supermarket and see those shelves completely empty, would you be surprised? In reality, this is gradually becoming a reality. The severe droughts in the American Midwest, especially in Iowa and Nebraska, have severely damaged the corn harvest. Corn plants have withered in the fields, the ears of corn are no longer as plump as before, and yields have fallen by up to 25% compared to last year. Moreover, the cost of transporting corn from farms to processing plants has also increased dramatically due to soaring fuel prices, pushing cornmeal prices to unprecedented levels. In major supermarkets like Walmart and Kroger, consumers are rushing to stockpile even the smallest bags of cornmeal. Some stores have even had to limit the quantity sold to prevent stockouts. Cornmeal is the new gold, a shopper in Texas exclaimed after managing to buy the last 2 bags. Experts predict that if this situation continues, cornmeal prices could increase by an additional 30% by the end of the year, and the image of empty shelves will no longer be too unfamiliar. 6. The disappearing bean. Why lentils and chickpeas are hard to find. Each time you visit an organic food store, do you find yourself easily picking up a bag of lentils or chickpeas? These protein-rich, inexpensive beans are an indispensable source of nutrition in vegetarian or diet-conscious eating. However, this availability may soon be just a memory. Severe climate change in major growing regions like Canada and India has caused a sharp decline in the production of lentils and chickpeas. The once golden and green bean fields are now just dry, cracked expanses of earth. In the United States, as imported supplies have decreased sharply, the prices of lentils and chickpeas have nearly doubled compared to last year. Major distributors like Costco and Sam's Club have begun to limit the quantity sold to each customer. Astute consumers have begun to hunt down every remaining bag of beans, stockpiling them as if they were the protein gold of the future. Forecasts from agricultural experts indicate that if severe weather persists, the supply of lentils and chickpeas on the market could decrease by an additional 20% by the end of this year. causing prices to rise relentlessly. 7. The oil drought. Why olive oil is fading from shelves. If you have ever visited the cooking oil section at major supermarkets like Whole Foods or Trader Joe's, you will notice that bottles of extra virgin olive oil are usually neatly and brightly displayed on the shelves. But recently, that scene is gradually disappearing. In Spain, the world's largest olive oil exporter, the vast olive groves are now just barren and desolate. Historic droughts have reduced production by up to 30%, causing olive oil prices to skyrocket globally. It's not just Spain. Olive-growing regions in Italy and Greece are also facing a similar situation. Farmers stand by, watching their ancient olive trees wither, leaves falling to the ground, unable to do anything. As supplies dwindle, olive oil prices in the US have surged, and many supermarkets have had to limit the quantity sold. Consumers have rushed to stockpile, and the shelves once filled with the green hues of olive oil bottles are now just cold, empty spaces. Experts warn that by the end of the year, olive oil prices could increase by an additional 25%, and this shortage will worsen as demand continues to rise. 8. The sugar shortage. Why sweetness is becoming a luxury. A cup of coffee without sugar in the morning? Can you imagine it? For many, sugar is an indispensable sweetening agent in every morning and every meal. However, recently, the sight of neatly stacked bags of white sugar in supermarkets is gradually disappearing. In Brazil and Thailand, the world's two largest sugar producers, sugarcane fields have been severely damaged by floods and climate change. High water levels have swept away even the lush green sugarcane rows, leaving behind a desolate scene. This shortage immediately affected the global sugar market. The prices of white and brown sugar in the US increased by nearly 20% in just the first months of the year, and many stores had to limit the quantity sold. Major confectionery manufacturers like Hershey's and Mars have even announced production cuts to conserve raw material supplies. When sugar runs out, sweetness disappears. A consumer in New York shared while holding the last bag of sugar at the supermarket. Experts warn that if unusual weather patterns continue, sugar prices could increase by an additional 15% by the end of the year, and those sweet sugar crystals will become a luxury item that not everyone can afford. The powdered milk crisis. Why this white gold is vanishing. There is something that the most astute have begun to quietly stockpile: powdered milk, not just a food for children. Powdered milk has now become a type of white gold amidst the global food scarcity storm. It all began on dairy farms in California and Wisconsin, the two largest milk-producing regions in the United States. Prolonged droughts, scarce water sources, parched pastures, and visibly thinner cattle. Fresh milk production plummeted, and prices climbed daily. As fresh milk became expensive, consumers turned to powdered milk, something that could be stored for a long time and easily used with just a little warm water. But that was also when the shelves at Walmart and Costco emptied. Every carton of powdered milk was quickly snatched up, no longer the neatly arranged display of before. Powdered milk is the new white gold, a shopper in Texas shared after finding the last few cartons. Not only families, but also bakeries and restaurants rushed to stockpile powdered milk. On eBay and Amazon, powdered milk prices doubled, even tripled, compared to the listed price. Forecasts from the USDA indicate that if the situation does not improve, powdered milk prices could increase by an additional 20% by the end of the year, and scarcity is inevitable. 10. The hidden treasure: why vinegar is now a survival essential. Something seemingly simple, but has become a treasure in times of scarcity. Vinegar. Not just a common cooking ingredient. Vinegar is also a wonderful natural preservative that can extend the shelf life of food for many years. In many rural areas of the United States, people still maintain the tradition of pickling vegetables and fruits in vinegar to preserve them through the long winter. However, by 2025, vinegar became scarcer than ever. Vinegar production plants in France and Germany, major suppliers to the global market, were forced to reduce capacity due to shortages of raw materials. Consumers began to realize the enduring value of vinegar and did not hesitate to snatch up rows of white vinegar and apple cider vinegar on store shelves. In supermarkets like Walmart and Target, the vinegar section was frequently empty. Not only used in cooking, vinegar is also an important ingredient for cleaning, disinfecting, and even preserving meat and fish. Astute consumers stockpile vinegar as part of their long-term survival plan. When everything else rots, vinegar preserves. A long-time prepared individual shared while checking his storage filled with vacuum-sealed bottles of vinegar. 11. The lentil lockdown. How this protein-packed food is disappearing. It is perhaps unexpected that lentils, a familiar ingredient in soups and salads, are gradually vanishing from supermarket shelves. In Canada, the world's foremost lentil exporter, climate change and flooding have devastated numerous lentil-growing fields. Land that was once fertile and verdant now consists of cracked, arid patches. Farmers face crop failures, with production plummeting by as much as 25% compared to the previous year. Consequently, in the United States, lentil prices have soared, and major retailers like Costco and Safeway have had to limit purchase quantities. Vegetarians and those pursuing healthy diets have begun to hunt for every remaining bag of lentils. People are stocking up like it's going extinct, an employee at Trader Joe's remarked. More than just a dish component, lentils are an affordable and sustainable source of protein in dietary regimens. Experts predict that if the drought persists, by the end of the year, lentil prices could increase by an additional 30%, and the scarcity will become even more severe. 12. The baking breakdown. Why yeast is becoming a commodity. Do you recall the time when the COVID-19 pandemic erupted and people everywhere rushed to bake, causing yeast to become unbelievably scarce? Now, history is repeating itself. In France and Germany, the largest yeast-supplying nations in Europe, production plants are being forced to reduce capacity due to raw material shortages. Increased production costs, combined with a wheat shortage, are turning those small packets of yeast into a luxury item on store shelves. In the United States, yeast prices have already doubled compared to last year. Consumers are flocking to buy and store it, not only for baking, but also as a precaution for the challenging days ahead. Professional bakers and small bakeries are seeking alternative supplies or learning the art of natural leavening from flour and water, an ancient method once common in the 19th century. Experts predict that if the supply chain is not restored soon, by the end of the year, yeast prices could rise by another 20%, making the simple act of finding a small packet of yeast more difficult than ever. 13. The dried fruit dilemma. Why raisins and apricots are disappearing. If you have ever enjoyed a fragrant raisin bread or savored chewy dried apricots, cherish those moments. Because these dried fruits are gradually disappearing from store shelves. In California, the leading raisin-producing region in the United States, climate change has brought about devastating droughts. In 2025, grape production fell by 30%. Vines withered under the intense sun, and grape bunches shriveled before they could fully ripen. A similar situation is unfolding in Turkey, which exports the majority of the world's dried apricots. The prices of raisins and dried apricots in the United States have skyrocketed, far exceeding analysts' predictions. The store sections that once overflowed with dried fruits now display only a few lonely bags on the shelves, In major supermarkets like Walmart and Target, consumers are rushing to buy, filling their carts as if these were luxury goods. "I never thought I'd be fighting over raisins," a woman shared as she tried to grab the last bag. Forecasts from the American Farm Bureau Federation indicate that if the drought situation does not improve, the prices of raisins and dried apricots could increase by an additional 20% by the end of this year, and the scarcity will become increasingly severe. 14. The Grain War: How Barley is Becoming a Scarcity. You may not often think much about barley, but in reality, it is a crucial ingredient in beer production, livestock feed, and processed foods. In Russia and Ukraine, the top two barley-producing nations, record heat waves have scorched thousands of hectares of grain fields. The once lush, endless fields now show only cracked, barren earth. Farmers shake their heads in dismay at the sight of withered yellow seedlings, exposed under the burning sun. Adding to the problem, economic tensions and export bans have further exacerbated the situation. Barley production has fallen sharply, pushing prices to record highs. In the United States, major beer manufacturers like Anheuser-Busch and Miller Coors have announced shortages of raw materials, forcing them to reduce production. Consumers are quickly feeling this change as beer prices soar. And barley-based products like cereals and livestock feed also become scarce. Experts predict that if the situation does not improve, by the end of 2025, barley prices could increase by an additional 25%, and consumers will face a severe shortage. 15. The Noodle Nightmare: Why Instant Ramen is Running Out. One evening in New York, the instant noodle shelves at a supermarket were packed with shoppers, not because there was a promotion, but because instant noodles were becoming strangely scarce. Every packet of ramen, shin ramyun, indomie, was snatched up within just a few hours. Supermarket staff had to limit the quantity sold, leaving latecomers to only stare at the empty shelves. The cause of this crisis stems from the disruption of the supply chain in Asia. The price of raw materials has risen sharply, especially for wheat flour and cooking oil, forcing many instant noodle factories in South Korea, Japan, and Indonesia to halt production or reduce output. Moreover, the soaring cost of international shipping due to rising fuel prices has also pushed instant noodle prices in the United States to their highest level in a decade. With their long shelf life and ease of preparation, instant noodles have become a top choice for those who prepare diligently. Consumers are rushing to stockpile, and the aisles at Walmart and Costco are consistently empty. Instant ramen isn't just food, it's survival. One shopper shared while filling his cart. Experts warn that if the shortage is not resolved, by the end of 2025, instant noodle prices could increase by an additional 30%, and finding them on store shelves will become a luxury. 16. The Peanut Butter Panic: Why this staple is disappearing. You might find it hard to imagine empty peanut butter shelves where once rows of shiny Jif and Skippy jars stood. Yet, this has been and is happening in many major supermarkets across the United States. The primary cause is the prolonged drought in major peanut-growing states like Georgia and Texas. The once lush, endless peanut fields are now dry and cracked. Farmers struggled to harvest, but production fell by as much as 30% compared to the previous year. This shortage immediately affected the peanut butter manufacturing industry. Processing plants no longer had enough raw materials, forcing them to reduce production. Peanut butter prices in supermarkets soared, and many places were sold out within just a few hours of opening. Consumers rushed to stockpile, filling their carts with jars of peanut butter, knowing that this familiar food might disappear in the coming days. Forecasts from the USDA indicate that if the drought is not resolved soon, peanut butter prices could increase by an additional 25% by the end of the year, and consumers will face empty shelves for an extended period. 17. The canned chaos. Why canned vegetables are drying up. Have you ever considered that canned vegetables, a food item seemingly always available, might one day become scarce? Yet, this is gradually becoming a reality in many supermarkets across the United States. It all began with severe climate change causing widespread crop failures on vegetable farms in California, Florida, and Texas. The once verdant fields of carrots, peas, and cabbage are now just cracked, dry earth under the intense sun. With such a significant drop in production, canned vegetable processing plants no longer have enough raw materials to produce. In major supermarkets like Safeway and Kroger, the shelves that once held rows of canned beans, sweet corn, and crushed tomatoes are now empty. Consumers are rushing to stockpile, not only for convenience, but also because they understand that if the shortage continues, these canned vegetables will become green gold in the food market. According to USDA forecasts, if the drought situation does not improve, canned vegetable prices could increase by an additional 20% by the end of the year, and finding them on store shelves will no longer be as easy as before. 18. The soup shortage. Why dried soup mixes are hard to find. On a freezing winter day, you open your kitchen cabinet looking for a warm, comforting packet of dried soup mix for a quick dinner. But all you find is a cold, empty space. This image is becoming increasingly familiar in many supermarkets across the United States. Dried soup mixes, once a great option for a quick, nutritious meal, are gradually disappearing. The cause begins with the decline in the production of vegetables and herbs, the main ingredients for dried soup mixes. In California and Idaho, prolonged droughts have significantly reduced the production of potatoes, carrots, and onions. The once green fields are now just layers of dry earth. Without raw materials, soup manufacturing plants have been forced to reduce production, causing prices to skyrocket. Consumers quickly recognized this and began to stockpile every remaining packet of dried soup mix. On online forums, the price of a case of dried soup mix has doubled, even tripled, compared to before. Experts predict that if the situation does not improve, by the end of 2025, dried soup prices will rise even further, and the image of empty shelves will become the new normal. 19. The cereal crisis. Why breakfast is about to change forever. Can you imagine breakfast without crispy cereal bowls of cereal soaked in milk? Once a symbol of a convenient, quick breakfast, are now gradually becoming a luxury item. The reason is not far-fetched. Originating from the withered grain fields in the United States and Europe, severe climate change, accompanied by prolonged droughts, has significantly reduced the production of wheat, oats, and corn, the main ingredients for making cereal. Major manufacturers like Kellogg's and General Mills have been forced to cut production, leading to severe shortages in the market. In major supermarkets like Walmart and Target, consumers are competing to buy the last boxes of cereal, filling their carts as if it were the soft gold of breakfast. Moreover, cereal prices are also rising sharply month by month. Many families have to consider carefully when buying, as the cost of a box of cereal is now 1.5 times what it was last year. According to USDA forecasts, if the shortage is not resolved, cereal prices could continue to climb, and finding familiar boxes of cereal on store shelves will become more difficult than ever. 20. The baking supply shock. Why cornstarch is vanishing. You might not think that cornstarch would become one of the scarcest items on the market, but that is indeed happening. In major supermarkets in New York, Chicago, and Los Angeles, the cornstarch section is almost empty. It's not that people are eating more, but because the supply is drastically decreasing. The main cause comes from the shortage of corn, the raw material for producing cornstarch. Prolonged droughts in the American Midwest have caused corn crop failures, leaving processing plants without enough raw materials to produce. As a result, cornstarch prices have soared, and many stores have even had to limit the quantity sold to each customer. Cornstarch is not only used for cooking and baking, but is also an important ingredient in industrial products such as paper, textiles, and even cosmetics. This has led to increasing demand, while the supply continues to shrink. Experts predict that if the drought situation does not improve, cornstarch could become one of the scarcest products by the end of this year. When the shelves are empty, when everything you once took for granted suddenly disappears, only those who prepare in advance can live securely and sufficiently. Act today. Don't wait until it's too late to realize what you've missed.